Happy New Year to all of you. They told me I was on. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here and for sharing what we do here in the General Assembly with the nearly 11 million Georgians that we serve. I always enjoy this visit a few days before the session each year, and I hope it's helpful for y'all in doing your work. If you would allow me just a couple of minutes, I want to open with some introductory comments, and then I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. As some of you may know, we discussed last evening the images that we saw from our nation's capital yesterday. Shocking and indefensible images. My thought then and still is today that I pray we can move beyond this very ugly chapter in our history as a more united nation. In that spirit, I want to begin by thanking Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler for their outstanding service to our state. And I also want to congratulate Senators-elect Warnock and Ossoff, as well as Public Service Commissioner Bubba McDonnell, on their victories. There's going to have to be a lot of discussion amongst the members and leadership of our Republican Party on the path forward, both in D.C. and here in Georgia. I want that conversation to be an open and honest one, and one that will reflect the best of our principles and politics. Let me give you my opinion. Our Republican Party, and frankly our government, is at its best when it is working for our people, when we address fundamental issues that make people's lives better. We have to turn our attention from those seeking to divide us and focus our attention on the work that brings us together. I am proud that our House here in Georgia has a history of doing just that. We can look back over the past few years to modernizing our transportation funding formula in 2015, bringing sex offenders to justice in 2016, and in 2018, cutting our income tax rate and reforming our adoption laws. Just this past year, our House and General Assembly tackled fundamental issues central to who we are as a people. It was the House and the Republican majority that led on the hate crimes bill, the maternal mortality bill, and the Paid Parental Leave Act, which I am hopeful that the Senate will take up and pass this year. We will do so again this year as we turn our attention to the work our House committees have completed over the interim. They've worked on reforming Georgia's citizens arrest law, improving and expanding our mental health care system, and ensuring that our freight network continues to grow as part of our economic development plan. In short, I believe strongly that the work of the Republican majority in this House is a model for our party going forward. We have shown that Georgians want leadership that follows a positive vision of our future and deals with issues that touch their daily lives. I am certain that the topic of election reform will be front and center, given the concerns that we've heard over the past couple of months. As such, I'm announcing today that I will be appointing a special committee in the House on election integrity to devote its full attention to ensuring confidence in our elections process moving forward. That committee will have two primary charges. First, to keep our elections open and accessible to all registered voters. And second, to ensure proper oversight and security of our elections process. I will be announcing the membership of that committee and the rest of our committees sometime next week. But, and let me be clear about this, our focus is not on looking back, but on moving forward. We will devote the time and attention necessary to our elections process, but it will not be all that we do this session. Georgians expect more from their General Assembly than that, and they deserve more than that. We are in the midst of an ongoing pandemic. Many Georgians have been directly impacted by this virus, either personally or through family. Many others have been indirectly impacted by a reduction in wages, a loss of a job, or the closure of a business. I want those Georgians to know they are at the front of our minds as we begin the 2021 session. Yes, we do have challenges ahead, but working together, I am confident that Georgia will continue to be a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. And I am proud to lead a House that has time and again found a way forward when they said it could not be done. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, Brian.
Mr. Speaker, you talked about it the other day in an article, and you talked about it last April in an interview. The Loeffler-Ossoff race came out of what's called the jungle primary. Will we see legislation to end jungle primaries in Georgia? And also with that, is it time to look at Georgia as a 50+1 state? Senator Perdue would not have been in a runoff if Georgia wasn't a 50+1. So is that something that could be looked at also, or you're thinking about in jungle primaries?
You asked me two questions. I supported abolishing jungle primaries last January. I don't know who could be in favor of a jungle primary anymore. And I have asked some of the members that I anticipate will be on the Elections Integrity Committee that I want that to be a key component of any legislation they bring forward. I'm a little, I'm going to take a very, very cautious view of changing rules, basic rules, on whether it's 50+1 or do we go to 45 or, you know, whatever it might be. I'm certainly going to listen to both sides of that, and frankly, I don't know yet where I'm going to come down, except somebody's going to have to make a real strong case to convince me. You know, I'm an old football fan, and the thing I dislike most sometimes is the way they tamper with my game and change up rules that have served us pretty well for a long time. Can we give her a microphone?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'll stand up.
Yeah. I'll call on you, but don't start your question till you get a microphone.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, just wanted to know your goals for the 2021 session, if you could just outline them for me. I'm Brenda Waters from Georgia Public Broadcasting.
Well, I think I touched on some of them. I think that reforming our election laws to accomplish the goals I talked about is going to be one of the goals. I suspect there's going to be legislation to deal with some of the concerns from the pandemic that we've had. One specific example is, y'all may remember last June, we passed what we call the COVID liability bill to provide some protection to small businesses from lawsuits during the pandemic. That will expire this year, and so I think there's an appetite to renew it for another year. Mental health is going to be a real priority of mine this session. I think You know, I said last session, I think that we have relegated our mental health system to being sort of a second-class citizen in our healthcare system for much too long now. This is a disease that touches almost every family in Georgia. You know, the treatment options are quite frankly really disappointingly limited, and particularly in rural Georgia. You know, I had a young man share with me an observation that I should have known, but he just brought it home real clearly several months back. He said, you know, in rural Georgia, you've got to get arrested and put in jail before you can get mental health treatment. And that shouldn't be the case. So that's going to be one of our priorities. You know, I think there's always some education measures. One of the things that I wanted us to deal with in education this session is, you know, we're only one of 5 states that still does not consider dyslexia as a learning disability. And I think that needs to change. And we need to recognize that for being the serious obstacle for many children that it is in terms of learning. So, and oh yeah, pass a balanced budget. Yeah, just.
So Republicans will control redistricting this year. Since it's possible Democrats will continue to gain strength in Georgia, would this be the time for Republicans to support creating an independent commission to draw district lines as some other states do?
Well, you know, it's always funny to me that, you know, we had a bill or two that was dropped over the past few years by members of the minority caucus to do that. And so I went back and did a little research, and you know, they were in control of this state for 145 years, and it wasn't ever a priority then to them. You know, the Supreme Court has recognized, I mean, let's just be very frank here, that reapportionment is a political process, and there's nothing evil or wrong about that. And so I think that this General Assembly is fully capable of doing that. I don't think that we should abdicate our responsibility to anyone on that. Yeah, right. Up here.
Do you think election reform should include eliminating no excuse absentee voting?
Eliminate absentee voting?
No excuse absentee.
No. You know, we went to that in 2005 under a Republican General Assembly. I think, here is my goal on absentee ballots, okay? I think the level of security should be just the same for an absentee ballot as it is for in-person voting, or whether it's early voting or day of election voting. That's what I want to accomplish. You know, we might look at tightening up some of the, and maybe categorize some reasons, but you know, I want elections to be open, you know, but I want them to be fair, and I want them to be secure.
You would be against this push to roll back absentee ballot being available to everybody?
For no excuse, I'm going to be very, I'll go to my answer to Mr. Pritchard's question earlier. Somebody's going to have to make a real strong case to convince me otherwise. Yeah, back. Yeah, you're going to need a mic.
You mentioned the citizens arrest law as one thing you want to visit in the criminal justice reform. Are any of the other options out there, like no-knock warrants, things like that, are they going to be on the table too, or do I presuppose when you talk about citizens arrest that that's the main priority?
I haven't really heard a lot of discussion about visiting the subject of warrants. I think there is an appetite to take up and debate modifications in the citizens arrest law, and I've committed to Chairman Chuck F. Stration that I'm supportive of his work on that. You know, I put him to work immediately after we adjourned last June, and he had hearings late summer and fall on that issue, and I know that his work is of high quality, and I look forward to taking a look at it. Mr. Amy has been standing up anxiously.
I would say eagerly. There are some discussions that because many schools have not offered in-person classes, that bolsters a case for some sort of school choice legislation. Do you see that as something that could be a priority in the House this year?
Can you repeat that? The volume tailed off.
There's been a discussion that because some public school districts have not offered in-person classes, that should motivate lawmakers to do more to put forward some sort of additional school choice legislation this year.
I think that's something we need to take a look at. Frankly, I think that I think our school kids need to be in a classroom. I'm very concerned that we're going to lose, you know, multiple years of academic progress by some of these kids, and so if school choice is one of the tools that we can reach a consensus on is dealing with that, then I'm certainly open to having that discussion. Let me come back here to Sandra, Brian, and then I'll come to you.
Couple of things. Can you address, and the governor touched on it a little bit yesterday, the security measures?
Sandra, can I, yeah, there you go.
The security measures for starting next week. I know that he is activating the National Guard. Talk about the security measures, and in addition to that, talk about COVID measures and, you know, what you guys, I know you kind of laid that out earlier, what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. You know, back in June, when we came back in to complete the 2020 session, I put together a group of members and staff people here in the House to look at what we could do on COVID measures, and I think they came back with a great plan, and that's going to be sort of the core of what we're going to be doing this year. Masks are going to be required, okay? Period. In the House, whatever they do over there is I don't have any control over. We're going to social distance. That means we'll be utilizing the chamber, the gallery, and this room for session. But we have further adapted by we have a computer system now that will allow, it's a tablet kind of iPad system that will be stationed at the seats in here and in the gallery for those members to vote real time, so we won't have the verbal roll call that we did for the 2 weeks, last 2 weeks of last session. We've suspended the page program till further notice in the House. We've suspended having guests, the groups that we recognize during the session. We're still going to have the chaplain of the day, but the chaplain only can't bring a guest. So I have an obligation to take care of the health of the members of the House, the staff, and yes, even the news media that are lurking around here. And I take that very seriously. Because we're in a really difficult period with this COVID thing now, and so I think we're going to do twice weekly testing. We're going to be testing members and staff twice a week. We have the device at the entrances to the Capitol that everybody will have to go through to monitor, or do a quick monitor of your temperature. And so I think, you know, we put all that in a memo, but I think that we have got a very thorough plan to deal with COVID. The other part was security. Well, the governor decided to do the fence, you know, as you know, around the Capitol, and, you know, we've got great security here. I mean, you know, if the members of the Georgia State Patrol are the best in the country. And they're professional, they're top rate, and so we will have them here staffed up, as well as the Capitol Police, and I'm sure that if, you know, God forbid that we should need it, but you know, we also got National Guard units that I hope we don't have to utilize. I'm sorry? Oh, I don't know. I think it's going to depend on the rate, you know, and I think it's just going to be a decision that's going to be made, you know, quickly. I mean, we may have to make decisions kind of on the fly if the rate spikes here. Depends on, you know, we got to get our work done, obviously. I have charged Chairman Terry England of the Appropriations Committee. I want him to get the amended budget out quickly so that if, you know, we get into a long pause, that at least we have that out there and we can fund the state till the end of June. You know, COVID or no COVID, I still want to, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if we got out in less than 40 days. Yeah, Brian.
Back in March, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger entered a consent decree that you said in April should have actually come before the legislature and been debated in front of the legislature. Recently, you said you may be looking at this session what we call the Tennessee model, that the legislature would pick the Secretary of State. How would you go about guaranteeing the citizens that in the future, if something that should be debated, controversial, something like what happened last March, gets into the legislature? And are you still looking at the Tennessee model for Secretary of State office?
Well, I do think that should have been debated by the legislature. That was a fairly significant change in our election law, and to not have it decided by the legislature, I think was improper, and certainly to not give us notice about what was going on was even more improper, and it was very disappointing to me, as I said publicly back in April. I think, you know, we need to recognize that there are just some things that need to be decided on by the people's representatives, such as that. Now, I proposed, you know, the Tennessee model for selecting a Secretary of State. You know, we're going to talk about that, have some discussion about it. You know, I'm not wedded to that only. I mean, you know, I'm also now looking at possibly doing taking the elections function out of that office and doing a chief elections officer, which would not require a constitutional amendment, so that there is some more accountability there. You know, I know the Secretary of State, and I heard from people saying, well, he's elected. Well, he is, but you know, I think members of the legislature have a unique perspective on the views of the people of Georgia. And you know, when I go home for the weekend, you know, I've frequently have said jokingly, it's no longer a joke, that, you know, I have town hall meetings at the supermarket, you know, when I go stop by to get a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread, because we're, you know, out there with real jobs in our communities and seeing people you know, church or civic clubs or whatever it might be, which gives us, I think, a unique ability, and people expect us to be accountable on things like that. And, you know, they don't want to hear, well, we don't have anything to do with that, even though we don't. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. Yeah, Phil?
Mr. Speaker, is Chairman Fleming going to actually have a package of election reforms? You've kind of been talking about some of this today.
He's not told me that he has.
Okay, I was just wondering, secondly, do you think there might be an appetite for perhaps a joint House-Senate committee to look into these election fraud allegations?
Well, first of all, back to the first point, as you know, the lead member of the House on the election issues has been Chairman Shaw Blackman, and he's done an amazing job, by the way. I don't know about a joint committee. You know, you know, I don't want this to get caught up in a political pandering situation or a political posturing situation where people are trying to position themselves for possibly higher office in the future. And I would have a little bit of say-so over that if it were just a House committee. I think, pretty sure. But that I would not have if it were a joint committee. You know, I mean, I don't have any objection if they want to do something over there. We're going to do our own thing here. I'm not, you know, I've waited on them on issues before, and it gets a little frustrating. And this is an important issue, and I'd choose not to be frustrated. Mr. Salzer.
Hey, so the House did pretty well in the elections in November, correct? I mean, you I think only lost maybe 1 or 2 seats. So, and reform means reform to different people. Some people think it's reform to people, some people do not. So do you actually, I shouldn't say actually, do you think that there were significant problems with this election, including fraud, or do you think that the Republican legislature is responding to constituents who did not like the outcome of one race?
Well, let me begin by saying about a week after the election, we were having this discussion with a large group of Republican members, and they were talking about the fraud and, you know, doing a redo. I said, well, I'll tell you one race you're not going to redo, and that's mine. So, you know, James, I don't know that my view is what's important. It's the perception that people have. You know, let's look at the facts here. The facts are we've had 3 recounts. We've had an audit, and we've had more than 6, I've lost count, I know there's at least 6, lawsuits that have been filed, all of which have been dismissed. So, you know, which kind of begs the question, well, if there were, in fact, significant wrongdoing, would it not have been disclosed? But people are concerned, and I think we have to speak to those concerns. But I think we have to tell them the truth. And I think they have not been given the truth all the time on this.
Mr. Speaker, you mentioned the Freight and Logistics Commission. They've been talking about some pretty significant expenditures to try to address some of those issues. How much progress do you think you can make in the upcoming session on that?
Well, it will be a significant investment. There's no question about that. And one of the things, they have just finalized, I think, I haven't seen it yet, but I understand I'm going to be getting their final report, or at least a report from them. And that report, I understand, will have some proposals for how we fund it. I think we could be looking at a package that includes things like user fees or things of that sort. Yeah, it will require a significant investment, but it's also, I think, very, very crucial to our to further expansion of our economy here in the state. So I think it's something that we're going to really, really need to do at some point sooner rather than later. Mr. Amy. Oh.
Speaker, you talked about mental health in rural Georgia. Any other major priorities when it comes to rural Georgia? You know, the conversations I have with with schools is they could use some more money with everything they're dealing with. Any other areas that you find as priorities specifically for rural Georgia?
Well, all of rural Georgia, as you know, has been a priority of mine. We created the House Rural Development Council back in 2017, and they got to work later that year, and they've produced some great legislation on health care, for example, high-speed broadband. That's one thing that we're going to have to continue to work on, obviously, is expanding that. We've made some progress on that, and I'm very happy about that, but we've got a long way to go yet. And so I think whatever we can do to move that down the field is going to be important. Yes, sir.
Is there any possibility of money involved there?
I'm sorry?
Finding money for rural broadband.
Well, you know, that's an expensive proposition. You know, one of the things, to his credit, that President Trump proposed back early in his administration, didn't get a lot of attention, was a huge investment in infrastructure in this country, which included high-speed broadband in rural areas. You know, the Congress wanted to talk about other things, and they never passed his package. I'm not even sure it got a lot of serious discussion. It should have, but you know, that's water over the dam now. But you know, we're always looking at different proposals for funding, but that is the big, obviously the big challenge we have there. Yes, Jeff.
Mr. Speaker, there seems to be some possibility that there'll be a significant sum of money left at the end of the current fiscal year. Should we put that money into the rainy day account, or is there something we should spend it on, like COVID relief or schools or something else?
Well, I was very, very pleased with the fiscal prudence of former Governor Deal, who left an historic level in the rainy day fund, and thank God he did, because you know we had to dip into that last year for COVID. So you know, if there are some critical and urgent needs, obviously, you know, we can talk about those, but we are going to need to replenish that account. I mean, that is a priority.
Speaker, with the amended budget, do you expect that the funding levels will stay at the same amount as for the 10% cuts that were done this year, or do you see leeway to give agencies some more money?
No, I think you can expect that it's probably going to stay fairly level. with where we are now, which is an improvement over cutting like we did last year, back in June.
Let's do our final few questions, please.
Hi, Speaker.
How are you?
Great. The pandemic certainly exposed all kinds of holes in terms of the healthcare system in Georgia, especially in the rural areas. Do you see any relief in sight for the hospitals, the medical centers, all the people involved especially across the state, even more so than here in the metro area?
Well, I think the best possibility that we have right now is that we have vaccines that are out there. You know, one of the things that I have learned in just the last day or so is we've got an unacceptably high rate of healthcare workers who have not vaccinated, and that concerns me. They need to vaccinate, and so I think you know, the vaccines are coming on with greater frequency, and so I think that is the best route for relief. The other is to aggressively and diligently follow the guidelines that the Department of Public Health has given to us in every part of the state. And I think those work. You know, I don't like wearing this, but I wear it for you, like you wear yours for me. So it's just one of the things I think we have to do right now. Yes, ma'am.
Can the legislature do anything to improve the situation with vaccines out there?
Can you take? You're a little muffled.
Is there anything that the legislature can do to improve the situation with getting vaccines to everybody?
Well, I think we have the Department of Public Health and the governor have a good distribution plan in place. If you know, we'll take a look and see if it's a matter of funding or whatever it might be that we can address. To go back to a question over here, you know, I'm certainly willing to appropriate some funds to get the vaccines out there, but we got to take them when we get them there, okay? Yeah, Brian.
Mr. Speaker, just going back to the elections one more time, election season's already here again. It's going to be 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the creation of the Election Integrity Committee, okay, and Monday night the President said he would be here to help the campaign in Georgia with us. Is this committee going to be coming out with some legislation or introducing some things that will get voted on where the citizens can see what changes may occur or being proposed before 2022 that would be in place?
Yeah, I would expect it would. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't pass significant measures this session, which would be, assuming the governor approved them and signed them into law, would go into law you know, July 1 or the end of the year, whichever. And you know, then we would also have the 22 session to consider measures in. It's a little late then, but not impossible.
I think Mr. Salzer's the dean of our press corps today, so we'll give him the final word.
You know what dean means. But it's such a nice way of saying it.
It is. You know, I have to ask at least one budget question. So my question is, 2022, the governor's up, everybody's up for re-election, and the governor's going to want his $2,000 that he still hasn't given teachers for a pay raise. Do you think that'll be discussed during this session for the next fiscal year?
Well, he hasn't told me that he wants it. You know, he and I had an honest, difference of opinion on that, and it was respectful. It was my view that we had, as a General Assembly, made a commitment to the people of Georgia when we passed the first part of the income tax cut to pass the second part in 2020. And he wanted to go the teacher pay raise route. Then the pandemic hit and it all became, moot. If we get back to that point, I don't know that my position has changed. I still think, particularly now, people need their money, and they need to keep more of their money. I wish we could, give everybody in the state government a pay raise, but it's just we do have limited resources.
We'll end there. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all very much.